people they don't buy drills because they want drills. They buy drills because they want holes. People aren't buying our sensors because they want sensors. People are buying our sensors because they want detection so that lights can change, so that they've got happy driving public that are getting where they need to go safely and efficiently.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Pulse podcast from Wavetronix, where we talk about everything transportation and traffic. Today we have a very special guest, Jeremy Wright. He is in senior leadership at Wavetronix with a passion for strategy and business growth, with a background in brand management and degrees in computer animation and business management from BYU. He's spent more than 12 years at Wavetronix driving strategic clarity and innovation, and we're excited to have you here, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks. I'm excited to be on the show with you, Todd.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Knowing a little bit about your background, you grew up in Virginia.
Yes, yep.
Okay. And you were a roofer for a while?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I was graduated from high school. I'd gone out to BYU for a semester and then came home dead of winter. It's December, right? The holidays. And I was leaving for a 2-year service mission to Mexico in February. So I had about a month and a half to kill. My mom says to me, Jeremy, there's this guy, and he employs people that are getting ready to go out to do these missions, and he does roofing. You should give him a call. I said, well, that sounds great. I'd never done roofing. Yeah. Never really even been on a ladder before, right? So we go out there. I remember my first day on the job with Keenan. He's a good friend of mine. He actually lives out here in Utah now. We do lunch occasionally, but we go out. It's snowy, it's a bajillion degrees below zero, and we're schlepping these ladders through this lady's house. And I'm just terrified that I'm going to swing the wrong way and knock some important vase off of a wall. And I make it through the house, and then I'm going up the ladder. And if you don't usually go up ladders, you kind of baby step it up the ladder, you know? And I remember I'm like, one little step, two little steps, terrified, right? And Keenan looks at me and says, You haven't been on a lot of ladders, have you? So on that first day, and just being so terrified, right? But I had a good time, made pretty good money, got back from my mission, and I thought, I am never roofing again. So I went to interview at a couple more traditional retail jobs, and they all just seemed horrible. And Keenan called me and said, hey, come roof with me. We'll do some bids together. I had a blast with him. We had a really fun time that summer. So yeah, that's my roofing experience, but I'm not a brave... Let's be up there, 4 stories, windy day with, I don't love that. So roofing wasn't going to be my permanent life call.
Yeah, good, probably a good call.
Yeah.
Did you have a fear of heights?
Not more so than others, but I mean, once you're actually up there on the roof and you're 4 stories up and you're leaning out and the wind's blowing, a lot of thoughts about mortality just come crashing through your head, you know. But you get used to it like anything else, where probably to an unhealthy level where you're just comfortable walking around up on these steep roofs. Yeah. But I fortunately never had any roofing accidents or anything, so here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So you served as a missionary for your church for a couple of years in Mexico?
Yep, in Mexico.
Okay. How did that, do you think, help shape you for your future life and business?
Oh, yeah, in lots of ways. One of the most interesting for me was I first get to Mexico. I love Mexico, but I'd never been to a developing country before. And we landed, it was April, and it's this foggy evening. It's like 11 o'clock that we finally land in Tampico is the name of the city. And I'm looking around, and because it's kind of foggy, you can't quite see everything. But it almost looks like a war zone to me because it's just a developing country with a lot of things kind of semi-built and different things. And I get to my first area the next day. And I'm just blown away at the level of living is so much different, right? And I remember being surrounded and just overwhelmed and like, I can't do this. Like this is, and it's not that I grew up wealthy by any American standard, but by a global standard, even your middle class kid is extremely wealthy, right? I didn't realize this at the time. So I'm thinking, I don't think I can do this. But within 2 weeks, I was so adapted to life and how it was. It shocked me, and I realized, wow, we're a lot more resilient than we think we are. There's things that we think, we first get the shock of it, we gasp and we go, oh, I can't do this. This is too hard. But if you give it just a little time, it's surprising. So I think in one important way, it taught me the power of the human spirit in being resilient. I think the other way was to help me realize just how fortunate we are to live here in the United States. And when I finished those 2 years and came back to Virginia, again, middle-class neighborhood, I remember being blown away thinking, there's so many cars and they're so nice. And I got to just our little average home and I'm like, this is a palace. This is so nice. So it really shifted my gratitude and broadened my eyes to, okay, we've got something really special here. There's something great going on. So those would be two of the ways that I'd say it really shaped me.
Yeah. And it's probably served you all of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. In lots of ways to try and have more of that gratitude attitude, right? When you feel down or things are hard, to remember like you've got it really, really good. And there's a fun story in the NFL, a couple of coaches that are brothers that are famous, and their dad that was a famous coach. And they tell the story growing up, and they were pretty poor because their dad was trying to break into coaching. And, you know, they do all these crazy things, like dad would have them as they're walking to the grocery store, have to dribble basketballs with both hands, right? Just to learn that coordination for that sport and do different things. They did not have a lot of money, but he had this saying with him. And the saying was, who has it better than us? And the answer was, nobody. And so every time they'd have this rallying call of, who has it better than us? When maybe they didn't get to have dessert that night, or they had to skip a meal, or whatever was going on. And so that type of gratitude, I do that with my family. My kids, it kind of bothers them sometimes, but I'll say, who's got it better than us? And the cheer is, nobody, right? And so that's definitely stuck with me. And I think the roots to that come from that time in Mexico.
Yeah. So you went to BYU twice. Computer animation?
Yeah, it was industrial design because they didn't even have the computer animation degree at the time. And it was in the School of Engineering of all the crazy things. So I've got a BFA from the School of Engineering, which is kind of random. And I was an art kid growing up, but I also liked math and business a lot. So I decided to go into the illustration side. And then that computer animation program was emerging. And one of my friends that was in the program with me said, Jeremy, they're doing computer animation. I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool. So I was fortunate enough to get in and get to study with some of those tools. And I remember when Toy Story 2 came out, and we were all so excited about it. But I didn't actually land a job in computer animation. I had an opportunity or two that didn't quite materialize. I ended up working in web design for about 4 years and managing the business side, and I really liked it. And even though once I finished my undergrad, I'd sworn off going back to school, because my wife was always like, oh, you should go back to school, get a master's. I was like, no way. I'm so glad to be done with school. After about 4 years, I started thinking, I really like business. I want to get better at it and learn about it. So I went back to school, studied business, and it was so fun because all the time when you're growing up and you go to school, it's almost like you have to go to school, right? But for a little while as a kid, there's this magic window. You've got your new Luke Skywalker backpack and your lunchbox, right? And you're excited to go to school. I was able to channel that magic the second time when I was at business school. I was literally that excited, like going to school again, getting to meet friends, learning these cool business principles, having a fun internship. It really, it was a delightful experience. I highly recommend it. Anybody that loves business, go back and get your MBA. It's worth doing.
I would love to see you in the MBA program with the lunch pail, suspenders and backpack and all that.
That's right.
Yeah.
As long as you don't punch me and ask for my lunch money or anything.
Okay. I wasn't a bully. Yeah. So you worked for some big brands. Doing marketing.
Yep.
Hot Pockets. Am I going to get sued now?
No, I think Jim Gaffigan's over it. So I think you're okay to whether it's Nestle or Jim Gaffigan, I think you're all right.
Yeah. What was that experience like, and how did it help shape what you do here?
So that was really interesting because within marketing, especially at the business school level, brand management is kind of the Elysian fields. That's like we're in finance, maybe going to Wall Street. That's the goal. That's where you want to be, but it's kind of hard to get to. For marketing, it's brand management. So I had to hustle quite a bit to get it, and I had some good breaks and some kind people that opened some doors for me, and ended up at Nestle, and that was amazing. I mean, the people I was working with were just so talented and so professional, and it was such a difference from where I'd come from this little tiny web design shop with maybe, 10 people, 12 people, to the world's largest food organization. At the time, I think they were doing something like $80 billion a year in sales. And we know Nestle a little bit in the US because Nestle Crunch and the confections, but they're massive. They're Stouffer's and they're Hot Pockets and all these other brands. So being a part of that, I got thrown in, and the learning curve wow, talk about steep. Fortunately, I'd learned a lot about Excel in business school and with my internship. But I mean, we're processing massive amounts of data of all these different products at different stores. How are they moving? Why not? In addition to that kind of quantitative, there's this wild world of the creative part. I'd never done production or TV shoots or any of that kind of stuff. We're flying out to LA and New York. You got the full outfit with like the production bus, all the lights, the camera is just like, it was a little overwhelming and really exciting and really hard. But it was one of those things where I got to get this crash course in business at a different level and at a different speed. And at the time, the team that we'd had, a few people were leaving. So I'd called a friend of mine from business school who had wanted to live in Denver. And I said, hey, Kevin, there's an opening. You should come work for me. And I think you'd love it. He said, Jeremy, there's an opening out here in Omaha. I think you'd like it out here. And I was like, I hadn't thought of that. So flew out there, got recruited, and ended up working for Conagra Foods for a bit on the Banquet brand. And again, phenomenal people, different pace, pretty quick. And whereas with Nestle, it had been all about the data and the quant and the marketing side, Conagra was all about a lot of the financials and the supply chain side. So I got to get exposed to both ends of it and have some great experiences there. But after about 4.5 years, out of state, I was like, I want to get back to Utah. And Brian Jarrett, my brother-in-law, was an engineer at the time, leader there. And I said, Brian, if you guys ever need marketing help at Wavetronix, let me know. And he said, actually, we do. So that's what opened the door to coming here at Wavetronix.
You just answered my next question, but I did not know Brian Jarrett was your brother-in-law.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty similar. He's 6'8", tall, dark, handsome.
Yeah.
That's definitely what I've got going.
Yeah,
but it's actually not blood there. It's our wives are sisters. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I've known Brian since 1999. He's one of my favorite people.
Oh, that's great.
In fact,
so
you guys should interview him. If you
we have, actually. He was our last guest.
Oh, nice. I'll have to watch that. That'll be great.
So you started in marketing
at
Wavetronix.
Yep.
Transitioned into senior leadership. How did that happen?
It's kind of a wild road. I mean, that's how life is, right?
Yeah.
You kind of think you're here at X and you're going to get the Y and it's going to be this straight line that gets you there. And it wasn't like that at all. I started out in marketing, and I think one of the things that David noticed about me was that I liked thinking about the business, working on the business, thinking above the business and the strategy and how all the pieces fit together. And so I'd send these crazy emails. I went to a trade show and I'm like, whoa, Internet of Things and V2X, this is so big. So I sent this big email out to a bunch of the leadership. I'm like, guys, we got to do this and this and this. And I think he probably saw that and was laughing a little bit, but like, okay, this kid, he's got passion. He cares about business. So he called me into his office one day and said, hey, I want you to come visit with me. And I'm like, oh, great, the CEO. I'm like, do I need to bring anything? He's like, no, just bring your mind. I'm like, that's not much. So I showed up at his office and he said, Jeremy, it seems to me that you like working on the business more than in the business. And I'd never heard that phrase or thought of it that way. And I was like, well, one of the things about David, if you know David, he's pretty insightful. I was like, yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. He said, great. I've got some things I want you to do. And so it kind of blossomed from this marketing focus to strategy. We had some different big projects. So one of the big pain points we'd had as an organization, and that lots of organizations still have, is terrible meetings, right? It's like, oh, you go to these meetings and they're unfocused, it's boring, or it just goes on forever, or you've got things that you needed to cover that don't get covered, or you feel like you're going and you're just going to go. And that's kind of the gravity of organizations. That's just how things happen. It's not that people are bad or that they've got evil intent, but David had a vision for how we could correct that. And that's how we came up with this idea of traction and the meetings, the tactical meetings that we have. And so I was a part of helping design that, what it would look like, how to make our meetings a lot more effective, a lot more enjoyable. And they're not perfect, nobody loves meetings, right? But some people, broken people like me, like meetings. But they're so much better now, right? So that when I go to organizations that don't follow those principles, I just want to smash my head in a desk. I'm like, this meeting is just awful, right? So that one is an example of working on the business. And there's several other fun things that I got to do with David. And so one thing led to another, and then it was like, okay, hey, can you help lead this unit, provide advice to it? Yeah, okay. What if we wrapped boards, advisory boards around units? Okay, yeah, what would that look like? All right, let's put that together. All right, we've done that. And for a long time, we'd had a focus where for a bit we had an executive management team. But the challenge with the executive management team is that usually each management team represents a function. So maybe you've got the head of manufacturing, the head of sales, the head of engineering. And by definition, if I'm running manufacturing 24/7, I'm eating it, I'm breathing it, I'm sleeping it, that's always what's on my mind because it's just so pressing, right? And I can be the best manufacturing, and we've got one of the best manufacturing guys ever, but it can be very difficult to not be just in my lane of manufacturing. And the same for the sales guy and the same for the engineer. So David struggled to have this team step out of the day-to-day and work on the business. And it's because of where they were put. It wasn't that they weren't great people. They're very talented people. It was just a challenge. And so we'd stayed in that focus of these units, these groupings of departments, and they were a little bit isolated from each other. And it was just David by himself then trying to run the business. So a few years ago, we said, hey, what if we had a group around David, a senior leadership team, that was focused a little bit more on charting our course a little bit longer out, so it's not just David. And that group can be linked to these functional specialists, these unit heads, but not be in the business at the same level. So we had this idea of this senior leadership team called the navigators, and then these functional heads, these unit heads called the pilots. Navigators being someone charting a course, the pilot, the one actually driving the course, right? If you're using a sailing or a flying analogy. And so that's kind of the path. Ended up there being on the navigators and then also working with the pilots. So I act a bit as a bridge between that senior leadership team and then these unit executives, trying to translate vision and strategy into tactics and finances and make those work and other stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect transition into what we want to talk about now is Wavetronix and what makes it so unique and what makes it a great partner to work with. So when you're talking about vision and strategy for the future, there is a specific vision and strategy that people who are contemplating working with Wavetronix should know.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked it that way. So let's talk about that vision and that strategy. So for a lot of companies, and there's nothing wrong with this, there's not necessarily a wrong way to have a vision or a dream. I mean, it's all kind of the American dream, right? I want to be successful. And so some of those, that dream might be a little bit shorter vision. Hey, I've got this cool idea for this SaaS company or this cool widget. I think I could get some funding. I could get some people on. And maybe I have an initial public offering. I've got my IPO. I get some funding. I cash out. And I'm all set financially. And I can do that in 5 to 7 years. And people do that. And good for them. That's great. Some people might have a longer vision. Might say, hey, you know what? I think I could be a pretty good plumber. I'm going to start up a little company, and this is going to provide for my family for the next 30 years. And maybe one of my kids or an in-law will take it over after that, right? And that's a pretty cool vision too. People do that, and that works. The vision here at Wavetronix is unique in the sense that it's more like, what do we need to do to be around for the next 100 plus years? How can we become a multi-generational business? And so I'll dovetail into that a little bit of the founding back at the roots. So you have heard about David Arnold, if you're watching this podcast or familiar with Wavetronix. If you haven't, he's a professor, an engineer, and one day he pulls up to a traffic light and the light doesn't change. And there's this little light bulb that turns on and says, we could use radar to detect vehicles and change the lights a lot better than just sitting here waiting, right? One thing leads to another, and there you go. You got the Wavetronix. But as he's doing it, he has this thought. He's like, he had one of his graduate students, Brian Jarrett, really bright guy, really talented engineer, could not find work in Utah. So he ended up going down to Arizona. And David said to himself, I am never going to have one of my students have to go out of state. This is crazy. There should be jobs for these talented engineers here. So you start connecting the dots to these different stories Wavetronix founded, and the original vision is, I want to create jobs for these engineers here. Well, it blossoms out a little bit. It's like, I guess if we've got a company full of engineers, we probably need someone doing the books. And maybe we need some sales guys. And I guess we probably need like an IT guy, right? And you realize, I can't just have a company of engineers. I've got this company, but I've got the same vision. I want to create jobs and opportunities for all these people. And it's not just, I want to do it for right now. It's, I want to create this unique place where people can come together and thrive. And I want them to be able to do that for generations, right? So taking it back to your question of why should somebody who's considering partnering with Wavetronix care about that? Well, if you've got a partner that you know is in it for the long haul, they're not necessarily going to cash out in 5 or 7 years or whatever. They're being managed for the generations. Then their products and services are going to be there for you. And frankly, that's what you need, especially if you're like a city engineer or a state engineer. You're designing things that need to last for a while, right? It's not like you get new funding every month and you can just rip everything out that you've put up and put something new every single time. You make a bad decision, it bites you, and it bites you for a while because you might have exhausted those funds, and now you have to live with that decision for a while. So having a partner like Wavetronix that you know is going to be around for a while, that's managed with that long vision, that's just, it's worth its weight in gold.
And it's structured in a way that it's not going to go. It's not going to be sold out. David Arnold's not in this to make millions and millions of dollars for David Arnold to drive a Ferrari and live in the south of France.
Exactly. And again, different people have different things that drive them. For David, money's not one of them. I mean, unfortunately now. Could he, had he decided to structure the business in a way, certainly he could be driving Ferraris, and I would borrow it all the time.
Yeah.
It'd be a blast. But that's not what winds his clock, right? He's all about creating opportunities for people. And he's also all about control, like in a good way. So if we were to go public, well, now we're at the mercy of the shareholders, right? And let's say that a company came along and wanted to acquire us, and it was a profitable venture, like, hey, your stock's worth X, we'll give you X plus Y. And the shareholders could vote in and say, well, absolutely, we want to cash in. And now our destiny's gone. Well, it's not designed that way. It's a trust-owned business that's designed to go down through this family trust through the generations. So that helps people know, oh, yeah. And, that does happen. We've watched over the years as detection company after detection company after detection company has been acquired, merged with. And it's not necessarily the kiss of death, but it can be. And so if you think about times where you had a product or service that you loved and then it got acquired, what was your experience? Was it positive? And the answer is not always, and sometimes people find, so worst case scenario, imagine that you're this city engineer and you spent the last 5 years championing for a product and you finally got the funds, you rolled it out, your system's built around this great product, and then you open the paper and realize they've just been sold, been acquired. And that 6 months later, you find out that they're discontinuing whatever line. It's like, oh man, I'm stuck. Whereas the way we're designed, the way that we're structured, that's not going to happen. And that's an external thing like an ownership. But also internally, when you think about the management teams and the way we manage, I'll start with the way we manage. We manage very conservatively, right? We believe in living within our means. So we manage it a way that we're not going to go belly up and have to do layoffs. We've never held layoffs in the 25-year history ever.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool, right? Now it's not to say that if someone's not a fit that we're not going to have hard conversations and part ways, absolutely. But as a strategy, which is pretty typical in this space, frankly, to say, oh, well, we got a little funding and we got this little surge we need to do. Let's bring on 30% more people, and then when things get tight, shareholders get angry. Oh, we'll just axe them, and then a year later we'll hire them back on. That's not our style, right? So that's the way we manage. And having a management team that's cross-trained, there's redundancies, there's depth. We're trying to train our leadership from within through these experiences and give them a broad array of experiences. It really helps you feel like, okay, they know how to drive, and they're driving it in a responsible way that's going to keep the car on the road and things going for a while.
So this all sounds great, a great structure for the company, great management team, but you've also got to have a great product that not only works really well, but also lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you could have the world's best mission, Tom's of Maine or whatever. You have the greatest mission and awesome people, but if the product doesn't do the job it's being hired to do, it doesn't matter, right? And so I'm glad you bring that up too. And so we pride ourselves as being the gold standard as far as traffic detection goes and innovating. And so if we talk about some of these products, you know, one of our most successful is the Smart Sensor Matrix. It's been at intersections. We've had it out for, it's been, was it 2008?
You would know better.
I think it's 2008.
A long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 years. We're coming up on 20 years on this product, right? But you've got a product here that it's one of these set it and forget it, right? You mount it on the pole. You've got these array of radar beams, and it can detect, we call it true presence. It can see these stopped vehicles, and it just works. And that's the reason our users love it. You drive anywhere around our states or our cities where they're fans and champions, and you see our products all over the intersections, all over the freeways, and it's because it's so low maintenance. You know, are they perfect? No, they have problems like anything else, but a lot less so than you might find if you're dealing with loops in a freeze-thaw cycle, or cameras when it's windy or dirty or the sun's rising or setting, all these issues that you have with them. You just don't have those with it. And so having a product that's accurate, that's reliable, it's dependable, it ends up being a tremendous value over the life cycle of it. And our customers just keep coming back again and again and again because they're like, I want the best value. And I bring it back to, what do you absolutely not want if you're working for a city or a state? What you don't want is that angry phone call, right? Someone calls in, I was sitting at this traffic light for X number of minutes. It's been out for a week, whatever. That's not a good day at work there. That's not why you got into that business, right? And if our products and services can help them not have that kind of experience, but to have the kind of experiences where people are writing in saying, wow, I'm getting to work quicker, or my life is easier or better because traffic runs really well here, that's a great day. And we pride ourselves in being able to provide that kind of great day for our customers.
And our partners that have sensors, some of the original Matrix sensors are still out there running and have been for 20 years.
That's the crazy thing, is that it's like, okay, and then we release new products and services like, but I've got all these great, what sometimes I end up doing is saying, okay, cool, well, now I can take these original Matrix sensors or advanced sensors or HD sensors that we had, and I can put them in a different spot and then put this new product up here, right? Because they're just going to keep running. And that's some of the brilliance of the way our products are designed and engineered.
And manufactured. Manufacturing is very important here at Wavetronix. Can you speak a little bit to manufacturing and what partners need to know about how we do things here?
Yeah, first and very proudly and very importantly, we're manufactured here in the U.S. Right here in Springville, we're manufacturing these products here on our floor with skilled professionals. So where you might sometimes see a common way of people doing things is with contract manufacturers, which means you pay a certain amount of money and you get a little bit of time from their workforce, and you get a little bit of that mind share, and you hope it works out well, right? Whereas in-house manufacturing from trained professionals that have been doing it for years and just your product, you get all of that mind share, all of that expertise, and all of that quality control. So we're able to see from the beginning to the end and understand the process. So if there are any issues, we can diagnose those and work on it and make it better. So continuous improvement, right? It allows us to know that the product that's going out is going to be absolutely top quality. The other less direct benefit of manufacturing here is that if we were offshoring most of our manufacturing and then we bump up against political tensions that are swirling around or things happen, or let's say that another country decided to nationalize the warehouse or the manufacturing outfit, and they decide that the country of X now owns this, right? And then we're just left, our customers would be so negatively impacted. That's a non-issue, right? Because we're controlling that process. It's right here. So unless Governor Cox decides to nationalize Wavetronix to the state of Utah, which I don't see happening, I think it's a great benefit for us.
And we've got some great products, Matrix, HD, Advanced, you mentioned. So we're good. We're set. We don't have to worry. We can just rest on that, right?
Yeah. So the other tenet here that's pretty popular is this concept of continuous innovation, right? You know that if you rest on your laurels, you're not gonna do well. So quick aside on that. So I mentioned I studied illustration. I loved artwork. And I was kind of that kid in high school, like the artist guy, right? And I loved drawing. But I did kind of rest on my laurels my senior year. And I remember my art teacher, she's saying, Jeremy, you should, you got to be putting out some more product and stuff because you got this advanced placement, the AP testing. And I'm like, like this, I'm going to get a 5, no problem. I wasn't even worried about it. Well, I learned a good lesson. It came back and my score was a 4 on that. And some people that maybe weren't as advanced in their art, but had out-hustled me, did better. And it was kind of a wake-up call, like, yeah, you really can't rest on your laurels. And that stuck with me. And I think that applies here to business as well. Just because we're the gold standard today doesn't mean we get to stay there, right? We're only the gold standard for as long as we're the best at doing the job that our partners are hiring us to do. And so when we think about innovation and the way that we do that, customers that are familiar with us or have looked into a little bit have heard about Expanse. That's a different game, right? You look at that and you say, instead of just a single point of detection on a pole, going down with cables into a little bit of hardware in a cabinet, and that's it, we're trying to build a platform here where you're communicating with all of these detection points. And when you've got a platform and you're at different areas, that opens up a world of opportunity for you in terms of the types of problems you can solve for your customers. And so that's an example of something we're innovating. Another thing that people have seen recently is coming out is our new small intersection solution. So Matrix and Advanced, that's a great setup, requires about 6 sensors, and it's perfect if you've got a great big intersection. And there's lots of those in the US. But there's also lots of intersections that are tiny. Might be just a couple lanes going either way, but they still need some detection. Well, Matrix and Advanced might be overkill for that kind of an intersection. So we innovated and came out with a single sensor that can look and do the detection, do all the work for it. So it's cost effective, it works really well. We feel like it's a sweet spot solution for a new space. So those are just examples of, all right, we got to keep fighting to be on top of the game.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple when you explain it that way. The small system, 1 sensor, 4 approaches, detection for each lane. I mean, that's pretty groundbreaking. That's innovative.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, that's kind of like these Elysian fields is it all goes back to people they don't buy drills because they want drills. They buy drills because they want holes. People aren't buying our sensors because they want sensors. People are buying our sensors because they want detection so that lights can change, so that they've got happy driving public that are getting where they need to go safely and efficiently. And the easier we can make it to get to that safer, more efficient movement of traffic for their people, the happier they are. And so that makes it easier, right? It's a simpler setup, simpler assembly for them and configuration, and you're off to the races. That being said, as we innovate, we don't want to leave the customers that have invested time and money in the dust with us. It's like, oh, we've got this great new system, Expanse. Sorry you bought these sensors a few years ago. So we also like to be bridging and taking care of our customers, looking back, looking forward. So we actually built backwards compatibility in a way that now if you've got a Matrix or an Advance, you can connect that to this Expanse system, which is pretty cool. And then you get the benefit of that system approach of seeing all these different things, but you're doing it with the sensors you already had. So we're trying to, again, sounds simple, it's difficult engineering, but take care of our partners, our customers, help them feel like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be left holding the bag as Wavetronix, trying to maintain that gold standard, keeps innovating. Am I going to have to buy a new sensor every year? No, that's not the plan. We're just trying to bridge that way so that they can take what they've had that's worked and put it on this new platform as they expand out.
When we talk about the proposition of why anybody would want to work with Wavetronix and all these great things that we've talked about, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
You know, I think it's important, going back, it's a little bit of that touchy-feely, fluffy stuff, but I think it matters. Think about your experience in a restaurant. When you go to a great restaurant and you just have a phenomenal experience, it doesn't happen by accident. And it usually happens because the people that are striving to make that meal so phenomenal for you, it's a clean operation, it's a tight operation, and the people are happy, like they're growing, they're striving to be better, they're thriving together as a community. And all that rubs off in a way that your meal just felt different, like special. And you and whoever you went with, you walk away from that going, that was pretty cool. I think Wavetronix strives to be that. We're not perfect at everything, but we're really, really good at a lot of things, beginning with our people. And so if we're trying to create a place where people, it's not just a 9 to 5 that you punch it and you can't wait till you're off work, but you enjoy getting up in the morning and you feel like you're learning and becoming a better person and better at your craft, and that you're creating good things, and that the operations are getting better and better and better. All those things weave together and create an experience, we hope, for our partners, our customers, that it's like that meal where they're like, wow, that was really good. That was something special. It's not by accident. It's intentional in a million different ways. But I hope that all these little things that we're doing behind the scenes that a customer would never see, they manifest in a tangible way that people feel like, I am so glad I partnered with Wavetronix.
Yeah, well said. So when you're not at Wavetronix working on the business, maybe not so much in the business, but on it, you're with your family, you're bike riding.
Love bike riding. Love spending time with my family. Yep.
Are there some great lessons in business that can be learned from mountain biking?
Absolutely. So I had a bucket list item, which was competing in the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. It's in Leadville, Colorado. Wow. It's pretty hard to get into. There's a lottery. I mean, if you're like Lance Armstrong level and you win certain races, you can win your way in. This guy is not Lance Armstrong. So I got to compete my first attempt in 2021. It was my first actual ever mountain bike race. So it was probably dumb to start with the world's hardest mountain bike race. This was my first race. And, you don't know what you don't know. I went in and I didn't make one of the time cutoffs. At the 40-mile mark, I missed one of the cutoffs by a few minutes and I got cut. And it killed me because I'd been training with my buddies and I was so excited to do it. So that lit a fire inside me. And so I spent the next 3 years training, getting better, learning about it, and was fortunate enough to get into it and then compete. And it was crazy. I was having a stellar morning. I got up over the first 2 mountains. I'm probably 20 miles into the race and I get a flat. And it just kills you because every second is precious because you got to get it done in 12 hours or less or it doesn't count towards, it counts, but it doesn't count towards an actual completion. So I'm dying, but with great support from my family and some other people, I probably lost, a good 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes because of the tire change and some snafus. And then riding it was kind of lumpy as I'm going along and my heart's breaking and I'm like, I really want to do this. But overcoming this adversity and some different things, I could bore the audience with the whole story, but long story short, managed to get it done in under 12 hours. And it was so it's just like, yeah, I got it done. And it was just like Mexico to me was this eye-opening, wow, we're so much more resilient than we think we are. Leadville for me taught me you can dig deep. You can do things that you don't realize you can do. If you're willing to dig deep, really deep and go for it. There's almost nothing you can't do if you're really focused, hyper-focused on it, and you've got passion for it, and you're willing to sacrifice for it. So, yeah, I'd say biking's taught me some cool things.
Yeah, and you have to dig deep in business a lot of times, right? We have at Wavetronix over here.
Yeah, just recently, coming out of this epidemic that we had, there was these supply chain nightmares, right? This is uncharted territory for our poor procurement guys and our planning guys, because it's all right, suddenly these little widgets, these little parts that we buy to put together and make our things, instead of taking 3 months, they're telling us 36 months or 60 months. It's whoa, how are we going to do this? And so same idea, we got to dig deep, we got to pivot, we got to be resilient, figure things out. And those lessons translate directly. And with the right people, with the right passion, really, there's almost nothing you can't get done together. And I think that's one of the reasons people like to come together and work rather than just be a soloist your whole life. There's nothing wrong with that if that's your thing. But when people come together, you can get more done than you can just on your own. And it's more fun that way, right?
Yeah.
So.
Looking back on your career, what advice would you give to young Jeremy? I know young Jeremy,
man.
Your son, great kid, but you as a young
my son would be giving me advice because he's more mature and he's a better person than me. What would I tell young Jeremy? I think if I had to pick a few things, one would be I tend to be pretty wound up. My wife is telling me, calm down, things will work out. Life's going to be fine. So that probably be something hey, you're anxious about this and you're excited about it. Have that passion, have that. But it's okay to stop and smell the roses a little bit and realize things have a way of working out. So trust a little bit more that things are going to be just fine. The second advice I'd give to him, and I give to others when they ask, is a lot of times we think that we have jobs and we're paid to be busy. Oh, well, I came in, I replied to email, I answered phone calls, I went to a bunch of meetings, I was really busy. That's not why we're paid. We're paid just like our customers pay for us to get a job done. Our employers pay for us to get a job done. So it turns out, usually you need to be pretty busy to get that job done, but have a clear vision of what the outcome is of the next 3 months. Hey, if I get nothing else done this quarter, I'm going to get X done. And then align with your manager on that. Hey, manager, I've been looking around and it looks like the most important thing for me to get done is X. Am I seeing that right, or is there something else I should be working on? You'd be surprised at how easy that sounds, but how few people do that. If you're consistently going to your leaders and aligning on what the most important thing to get done is, and you're getting it done, you're going to excel so well. And I guess the third and last thing I'd say is remember that, people are going through different things, and a lot of times it's easy to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, but be pretty punitive on assuming the intentions of others. Cut people slack. You never know what someone's going through. And if we could be a little bit more patient, so hey, younger Jeremy, cut people a little slack. Recognize that sometimes people are going through hard things. Give them the benefit of the doubt. I think those would be a few bits of advice.
Yeah, and whenever you think something's going on in somebody's life, there's always something else going on in their life. Mm-hmm. So give me one leadership principle that you live by that you wish, hope, want everybody else to embrace.
That's a really good one. Never ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And I think if your people know that you're willing to stay late or come in early or roll up your sleeves or smash your head against a particularly difficult problem, you've asked them to do something. I'm working on something right now with someone that it's not easy, and it's meeting after meeting each week, and it's almost blunt force trauma of just smashing our heads, but we're making progress, But I'm in there in the trenches as a part of it, and I think that makes a difference rather than just saying, "Oh, well, go do that." I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a valuable one.
For anybody who wants to move up into leadership, any advice or any warnings?
Oh, sure. I think a lot of times, especially when I was younger, I aspired a lot to leadership. And I saw the fun part of it, which was, oh, hey, you get to stand up and direct this meeting or be the face of this effort, or you get to be in charge, right? And the reality of it, it's kind of cliche or trite to say, but the reality is it's really a lot more about service. There's almost this feeling of responsibility that begins to settle on you when you take on different leadership roles. So I'm a lot less gung-ho about jumping into leadership roles than I used to be because I recognize what that's going to cost. And one of the things I most admire about our CEO, about David Arnold, is that he willingly steps into those roles again and again and again. And I watch just the tremendous amount of time he pours into serving others and lifting others. He's an excellent model of servant leadership. And so that would be, it's not what it always looks like from the outside. And you get into it and you realize, oh, there's a lot more to it. And so be ready to be serving a lot more and realizing that the reason that it's a responsibility, it's a trust that should weigh on you a bit and feel like something rather than a privilege or a ribbon or a reward.
Yeah. How are you with ladders these days?
With ladders?
Yeah, going up and down ladders.
I thought you meant like the recruiting site. I was like, I don't think I've been there in a long time. Oh yeah, no, actual ladders. I'm pretty handy. Yeah? Actually, I mean, I don't want to brag too much, but I think my wife thinks I'm pretty handy with them because what I learned from Keenan was it's all about balance as you're moving it around. Because if you don't understand the balance, you're going to be wrecked. And then actually getting up and down them. Although I should confess that when I do my Christmas lights, there's one side that I'd have to get on the house where I'm way up. And every single time I'm way at the top of that ladder, I'm always thinking about the little hinges and the structural integrity of those hinges that would keep it from collapsing.
I wonder if everybody does that.
It just runs through your head, right?
Yeah.
You know? So we'll see. Maybe a ladder will be my undoing someday.
Yeah.
And you heard it here first, folks.
Could be. Well, we appreciate that you've climbed the ladder here at Wavetronix, and we could have this great conversation today.
Oh, thank you, Todd. And I couldn't have done it, honestly, if a lot of people hadn't opened a lot of doors for me. And so it's my hope that I can pay that forward and help anybody else out that I can. So thanks for giving me a forum to share some of those thoughts and get to share a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's been great. Great having you. And great having you on the Pulse podcast. We'll see you next time.